The silent exit begins long before the empath ever walks away. It does not start with anger. It does not start with revenge. It does not start with a dramatic message, a final argument, or a door slammed loud enough for the whole world to hear. It starts quietly inside the part of them that has been trying for too long, the part that kept explaining, the part that kept forgiving, the part that kept feeling the shift in your tone and still choosing to understand. The part that kept saying, maybe they did not mean it. Maybe they are hurting. Maybe if I say it gently enough, they will finally understand what this is doing to me. And then one day, something in them stops reaching. Not because they stopped feeling, because they finally understood. That is the moment people miss. They think an empath disappears suddenly. They think the silence came out of nowhere. They think the distance is cold, immature, cruel, or confusing. But an empath's silent exit is rarely sudden. It is built from 100 moments where they stayed when they should have protected themselves, 100 nights where they replayed words that someone else forgot, 100 conversations where they made their pain smaller so the other person would not feel accused. An empath does not disappear because of one mistake. They disappear when the pattern becomes louder than the apology. That is the truth. You can hurt an empath once and they will probably try to understand you. You can disappoint them and they may search for the wound behind your behavior. You can go silent and they may ask themselves what you are carrying. You can become distant and they may wonder if you are afraid, tired, overwhelmed, or wounded. Their first instinct is rarely to abandon. Their first instinct is to feel deeper than the surface. But if you keep making them carry the emotional weight of what you refuse to face, something changes. Their empathy starts becoming evidence. They begin to notice how many times they understood you while you refuse to understand them. They begin to notice how many times they softened their truth so you could avoid accountability. They begin to notice how many times you received their forgiveness but did not change the behavior that made forgiveness necessary. And that noticing becomes the beginning of distance. At first, the distance is internal. They may still answer, they may still smile, they may still show up, they may still listen, they may still say it is okay. But something behind their eyes has moved backward. Something sacred has stepped away from the door. Their body is still present, but their trust has begun packing quietly. That is the silent exit. The empath leaves emotionally before they leave physically, and most people do not notice until it is too late because empaths often leave in layers. First, they stop expecting you to understand. Then they stop explaining. Then they stop defending their feelings. Then they stop asking why. Then they stop trying to fix the room. Then they stop reacting to the things that used to break their heart. And by the time they finally walk away, the decision has already been lived inside them for a long time. So, what makes an empath disappear? Make them feel alone inside a connection they were trying to save. That is one of the fastest ways. An empath can handle difficulty. They can handle honest conflict. They can handle someone having wounds. They can handle imperfect communication, hard seasons, emotional heaviness, and complicated pasts. What they cannot survive forever is being the only person trying to keep the connection alive while the other person keeps treating their effort like something automatic. They cannot survive being the one who always explains, the one who always repairs, the one who always feels the tension first, the one who always apologizes just to restore peace, the one who always notices the distance and tries to close it, the one who always carries the emotional responsibility while the other person calls it love. At some point, they begin to ask, why am I the only one protecting this? And that question changes everything. Because the moment an empath realizes they have been holding a relationship together alone, their heart does not break loudly. It grows tired quietly. It stops fighting for a place where it keeps having to prove it deserves care. There is a scene many empaths know too well. They are lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation, not because they want drama, not because they enjoy overthinking, but because their body felt something unresolved. Their spirit felt dismissed. Their heart felt ignored. And while the other person sleeps peacefully, the empath is still trying to make sense of a pain no one else is carrying. They reach for the phone. They type the message, the long message, the careful message, the message where they explain their hurt without trying to sound hurt. They soften the sentences, they remove the anger, they add understanding, they add, I know you probably did not mean it. They make space for the other person's feelings before their own feelings have even been held. Then they stop because something inside whispers, I have said this before. That is when the exit begins, not when they send the message. When they delete it, because deletion can be a boundary too. Deletion can mean I am no longer handing my heart to someone who keeps treating it like evidence to argue against. Deletion can mean I am tired of explaining the same wound to the same pattern. Deletion can mean if they wanted to understand, they would not need me to bleed in paragraphs again. This is what people do not understand about empaths. They do not want to leave. They want to be met. They want to be understood without begging. They want their gentleness to be respected, not exploited. They want someone to notice when they are tired, not just notice when they stop giving. But if you only notice an empath when they become silent, you were not paying attention when they were hurting. The silent exit is not the beginning of the problem. It is the consequence of being unheard too many times. Do this to an empath and they will disappear. Keep dismissing the pain you caused because their reaction made you uncomfortable. Tell them they are too sensitive. Tell them they are overthinking. Tell them they are dramatic. Tell them they always make things deep. Tell them they should just let it go. Tell them they are remembering wrong. Tell them they are making you feel bad for simply telling you what hurt them. And slowly, they will stop bringing their pain to you, not because the pain disappeared, because you made your presence unsafe for honesty. An empath needs emotional safety more than perfect words. They do not need you to be flawless. They need you to be accountable. They need to know that when they speak from the wound, you will not turn their pain into a debate. They need to know that their sensitivity will not be used as a weapon against them. They need to know that their honesty will not become another reason they have to comfort you, because nothing exhausts an empath faster than having to comfort the person who hurt them. They tell you, that hurt me. And suddenly they are managing your guilt. They say, I felt ignored. And suddenly they are defending their right to feel ignored. They say, I need more care. And suddenly they are being accused of asking too much. They say, this pattern is damaging me. And suddenly the conversation becomes about their tone. That is how an empath learns to disappear. Not all at once. They disappear each time their truth is punished. They disappear each time their softness is used against them. They disappear each time their forgiveness is treated like permission. They disappear each time their pain is made inconvenient. And when they finally leave, people ask why they did not say anything, but they did. They said it in their tired eyes. They said it in their quiet mood. They said it in the way they stopped laughing the same. They said it in the way their messages got shorter. They said it in the way their body became tense around you. They said it in the way they kept giving you chances to notice what you were losing. You just did not listen until their silence became louder than their love. Do this to an empath and they will disappear. Make them feel guilty for having boundaries. The old empath may have believed that boundaries were cruel. They may have felt selfish for saying no. They may have thought love meant being endlessly available, endlessly understanding, endlessly soft. But every time someone made them feel guilty for protecting themselves, the empath learned something important. They learned who benefited from their lack of limits. A person who truly loves you may need time to understand your boundary, but they will not punish you for needing one. They will not call your self respect cruelty. They will not treat your peace like an attack. They will not act as if your healing is a betrayal. But people who depended on your self abandonment will always be offended by your self protection. The empath begins to see that. They begin to hear the translation behind certain words. You changed begins to sound like you are harder to control. You are cold now begins to sound like you no longer abandon yourself for me. You used to be nicer begins to sound like you used to have fewer boundaries. I miss the old you begins to sound like I miss the version of you that let me hurt you and still stay close. Once an empath hears that translation, they cannot unhear it. The spell begins to break. And when the spell breaks, Their disappearance becomes calm, not hateful, calm. They are not trying to punish you. They are trying to protect the part of themselves that kept getting wounded in the same place. That is why the silent exit can feel so final. Because by the time an empath stops explaining, they have already had the conversation with themselves a thousand times. They have already argued for your good side. They have already defended your potential. They have already told their own heart to be patient. They have already waited for change. They have already accepted the apology. They have already watched the behavior repeat. And then one day, the heart stops negotiating with the pattern. That is the day the empath becomes unreachable. Uneachable does not mean broken. Uneachable means the old door no longer opens. You can still message them. You can still remember them. You can still miss them. You can still say the words you should have said earlier. But something has shifted. The version of them that would have rushed to understand you is no longer standing at the front of their life. They may still care, but they no longer carry. They may still forgive, but they no longer return. They may still understand your pain, but they no longer volunteer to live inside it. That is the difference. The empath disappears when they realize their empathy has become a doorway to their own destruction. And a healed empath closes that door. There's another thing that makes an empath leave silently. Fake change. They can feel it. They can feel when an apology is not repair, but a reset. They can feel when someone is not truly sorry for the wound, only uncomfortable with the consequence. They can feel when softness appears only after distance. They can feel when affection arrives only when control is slipping. They can feel when someone is saying the right words but not becoming a safer person. And once the empath has awakened, words alone no longer hypnotize them. They begin to ask, is this repair or is this reset? Repair changes the pattern. Reset only changes the mood. Repair brings accountability. Reset brings temporary tenderness. Repair respects the wound. Reset rushes the wound. Repair says, I see what I did and I will do the work to stop repeating it. Reset says, can we please go back to how things were before you started holding me accountable? The empath who has been hurt too many times stops accepting reset as repair, and that is when many people lose them because they were prepared to apologize. They were not prepared to change. They were prepared to say the right thing. They were not prepared to become consistent. They were prepared to miss the empath. They were not prepared to respect the empath. And missing someone is not the same as valuing them. Some people only miss the access. They miss the listener. They miss the emotional shelter. They miss the person who made them feel understood without requiring them to become accountable. They miss the person who absorbed their chaos and still called it love. But the empath can feel the difference now. They can feel when someone misses their presence and when someone misses their usefulness, and that knowing sets them free. Do this to an empath, and they will disappear. Keep taking from their softness without protecting it. An empath's softness is not weakness, it is sacred. It is the part of them that still believes in tenderness even after being disappointed. It is the part of them that can see good in people who have forgotten how to see good in themselves. It is the part that gives warmth, listens deeply, forgives sincerely, and loves with a rare kind of depth. But softness without protection becomes exhaustion. If you keep taking from it without honoring it, the empath will eventually move that softness behind a locked door. And when they do, you may call them cold, but they are not cold. They are careful. Cold does not mean cruel. Cold means they no longer set themselves on fire to keep emotionally careless people warm. Calm does not mean weak. Calm means their nervous system is no longer a public place. Uneachable does not mean broken. Uneachable means they finally understand that not everyone deserves access to their most tender parts. This is the silent exit. It looks like peace from the outside, but inside it was built through pain. It looks like distance, but inside it was built through disappointment. It looks like they stopped caring, but inside they cared so deeply for so long that caring without change became unbearable. And here is the truth that many people realize too late. When an empath is still emotional, there is still a part of them trying. When they are still asking questions, there is still hope. When they are still explaining, there is still a desire to be understood. When they are still upset, there is still a part of them that believes the connection can be repaired. But when they become calm after being hurt repeatedly, be careful. That calm is not always healing inside the relationship. Sometimes it is acceptance that the relationship has already shown them what it is, and acceptance can be quieter than anger, but it is far more final. The empath's final goodbye often does not sound like goodbye. It sounds like, I understand. It sounds like take care. Sounds like I wish you well. It sounds like no more questions, no more paragraphs, no more emotional appeals, no more trying to make you see what they have already shown you. And after that, they begin to rebuild their life in silence. They stop checking, they stop waiting, they stop translating your behavior into excuses, they stop confusing potential with reality, they stop calling anxiety love, they stop calling emotional intensity a deep connection, they stop making your wounds more important than their peace. This is how an empath comes back to themselves slowly, privately, powerfully. They begin sleeping better. Their body begins unclenching. Their face softens. Their mind becomes quieter. Their energy stops leaking into someone else's chaos. They begin remembering what they like, what they want, what they dream, what they feel when no one is pulling on them. And this is the part that unsettles the people who lost them. The empath does not become empty after leaving, they become whole. They are not disappearing into darkness. They are disappearing from a pattern so they can return to themselves. That is the piece people miss. The empath's silence is not always an act against you. Sometimes it is an act of loyalty to themselves, a loyalty they should have had long ago, a loyalty they betrayed every time they ignored their body, softened their truth, excused the pattern, and stayed where their spirit felt tired. The silent exit is self rescue. And self rescue does not need to be loud. So if you are the empath listening to this, understand something deeply. You do not owe endless explanations to people who repeatedly ignore simple truths. You do not owe unlimited chances to patterns that keep injuring your peace. You do not owe emotional performance to someone who only believes your pain when it becomes dramatic. You do not owe access to people who use your compassion as a way back into your wounds. You are allowed to leave quietly. You are allowed to stop explaining. You are allowed to stop proving your heart. You are allowed to stop trying to make careless people careful with you. You are allowed to choose peace without making a speech. And if guilt rises, let it rise without obeying it, because guilt is not always truth. Sometimes guilt is just the old conditioning that taught you to be responsible for everyone's emotions except your own. When guilt says, you are being cruel, ask, or am I finally protecting myself? When guilt says, you should explain again, ask, how many times have I already tried? When guilt says, what if they are hurt? Ask, what about the hurt I kept swallowing? When guilt says, what if they think I do not care? Ask, why does caring require me to keep disappearing? That last question is sacred. Why does caring require me to keep disappearing? If a connection requires you to disappear in order to survive, then maybe it is not love asking for patience. Maybe it is a pattern asking for access, and you do not have to give it. The practical step is simple. Before you disappear from someone's life, make sure you have first returned to your own rest turn, to your body. Notice how it feels around them. Return to your truth. Notice how often you silence it. Return to your peace. Notice how often they disturb it. Return to your boundaries. Notice who becomes offended by them. Return to your memory. Notice whether the apology has ever become change. Then speak once, clearly, if it is safe and necessary. Say, I care about you, but I can no longer stay in a pattern that keeps costing me myself. Then stop. Do not argue with the reaction. Do not turn your boundary into a debate. Do not keep explaining until your truth loses its shape. Do not stay just because someone finally became emotional when you became serious. Say it once. Then let consistency protect the sentence, because the empath does not disappear to create pain. The empath disappears when staying would require self betrayal. That is the difference. And when the next chapter begins, remember this: the people who truly value you will not wait until you are silent to hear you. They will not wait until you are distant to respect you. They will not wait until you are gone to understand that your softness was never guaranteed. The right people will protect the connection while you are still in it. The wrong people will only realize what you gave after you stop giving. That is why the silent exit is so powerful. It is the moment an empath stops begging to be valued and finally values themselves. It is the moment they stop proving their love and start protecting their life. It is the moment they stop explaining the wound and start leaving the pattern. So if someone keeps dismissing you, confusing you, using your forgiveness, punishing your honesty, mocking your sensitivity, draining your softness, and calling your boundaries cruelty, do not be surprised when your soul begins to step back. That step back is not weakness, it is wisdom. That silence is not emptiness, it is protection. That disappearance is not cruelty. It is the return of someone who was tired of being emotionally absent from themselves. Do this to an empath and they will disappear from your life. Make them feel like loving you requires losing themselves. And when they finally understand that, they will not leave to hurt you. They will leave to save the part of themselves that kept trying to love you through the damage. The silent exit is not when an empath stops caring. It is when they finally care about themselves enough to stop staying where their heart is not safe.